Okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the famous Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the great Kabbalist and Halachist, said, Shalosh matanos tovos, nosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 3 gifts, 3 good gifts that God gave to Israel, to the children of Israel. The kulam lo nitnon ela yidei yisurim, and all of them were only given by way of suffering. Ve'elu hein, and they are as follows: Torah, ve'eretz Yisrael, ve'ha'olam haba. Torah, the land of Israel, and the world to come. So, all of these, he says, are received through suffering. What is the meaning of these 3 gifts? So we discussed recently the idea that these 3 gifts each represent a transformative quality in the human experience. So they are at once within the human experience, but at the same time transforming the human experience to something which it otherwise would not be. And so these need to be through Yisurim, through suffering, because the suffering is the difference between receiving it as a gift, in which it's implanted within you, versus becoming transformed to the new reality in which it becomes you. So if I give you something to memorize, that would be a gift. If I teach you, if I tell you over words to repeat after me, so that would be a gift. I gave you holy words to say. But if you struggle and make mistakes and come up with a new perspective, then that would be something in which you become transformed to the new reality. The Torah, these 3 things represent the meeting point between, on the one hand, that which God gives us, which we could never achieve even through struggle, but at the same time, God gives it to us in such a way that we do, that all of these 3 things, Torah, the land of Israel, and the world to come, all represent something completely godly, completely otherworldly. In this sense, they're a gift. But on the other hand, they are truly accessible through the human experience, and therefore the only way for us to become transformed, to absorb them, would be through the awkward experience of suffering. They represent 3 dimensions.
Done through love and commitment. Why does it have to be through suffering?
Why can't it be done through love and through commitment? So first of all, I would say you said 2 different things. Love, why can't they be through love and commitment?
What I mean is, if you teach me something and say something that resonates with me, that I want to take that further because I understood it, and I enhance it, and I read about it, and I learn about it, and I love it, and I absorb it.
Okay, so I just want to take it. So you asked 2 questions, and I think they're both valid questions, and they each have a different answer. You said through love and commitment. So I would say, first of all, commitment is ultimately defined by suffering. How committed you are to something will be measured by how much you're willing to suffer for that thing. And in a sense, we say the same thing about love. Love is easy when there are no sacrifices to be made. But while love is not necessarily suffering per se, love can be measured through suffering. This is point number 1. So this is one answer, one angle to the question, which is yes, as we've been discussing in the past, suffering, Yusurin shel ahava, suffering of love, are not necessarily contradictory statements. They can sometimes be one and the same. As a matter of fact, no one suffers like one in love. Now, as far as the other point, which is when you learn something which resonates with you, what you're actually doing there is not learning something new. When you learn something which resonates with you, you're actually hearing what you already knew put beautifully. And in that case, it isn't something new. It's just a restating of that which you already know, right? So it's you would say the difference between a progressive growth, incremental growth, or completely a paradigm shift. So incremental growth is usually easy to swallow, easy to accept. For example, when a person goes to learn, let's say, learn to play a musical instrument, every time they learn a new trick, let's say on the guitar, it's exciting, right? That's incremental growth. They already know a little bit, and each time they're building on their learning. They're unpacking the study of playing the guitar. But the first time that person picks up a guitar, they go from being a non-guitar player to being a guitar player. They're making a complete paradigm shift in their life. And that, especially for someone who, and even this is talking about somebody who already knows about music, knows what music is, etc. It's hard to find a good example for a real paradigm shift that's introducing something completely new to a person's life that they never knew of before. But to suffice it to say, if something will truly be new, that you've never heard of before, that's completely foreign to your frame of reference, it will be awkward and uncomfortable at first. And if you think about it, this is along the lines we say, Kol hascholos koshos. Learning Japanese, okay, right? So the first time you're going to go into hear people speaking Japanese is going to be Kol hascholos koshos. I would say an example might be, it's hard to find a real example of something that a human being, because everything that a human being does ultimately has some frame of meaning. Everything that the human race knows, the human race already knows. We all know, and so it's just a developmental, it's just it's either one step incrementally more advanced, or it's a parallel reference to another degree. So I know English, so I'll know Japanese, but I know what languages, right? So it's all within the same frame of reference. So, but, so I want to say, Kol hascholos koshos, all beginnings are difficult. If you think about it, all things, all endeavors which we embarked on, which were really worth doing, did not go easily in the beginning.
And that's the point of suffering.
And so that's what so I think that's one aspect, one manifestation of this idea, that when you're introduced to something completely new, completely different, it's going to be awkward and difficult. Okay? This is one approach to understanding this teaching. Okay?
So when I decided to become observant and move down that path, it caused problems in my marriage.
Let's say.
And that's suffering.
Yeah?
Right?
Or I wouldn't say, and that was a source of distress for you. Absolutely. Internally, right? Okay, so I think that was a good example. I was going to say one example is a person who starts going to shul. Right? So I had this experience. I went to experiment with Tai Chi. Right? So the first time I went to learn Tai Chi, I understood for the first time in my life what it feels like for a new person to come into shul never having been in shul before. Everyone all around me is dancing and twirling and twisting their hands and their feet at the same time, and I'm standing stum. I don't know what to do with myself. I can't do my hands and my feet at the same time even. It was terrible, terrible. You understand this? I didn't understand what this means. I can't even move my hands and feet at the same time. Then I tried to do just my hands. I couldn't even get my hands right. Then I tried to do just my feet. Couldn't get my feet right. And everyone else is moving all around me, and I'm tripping over my feet, tripping over everyone around. So that's an example. But after a while, it became a very meaningful meditation in which I learned a lot about connecting with my body. I learned a lot about davening also. I learned about the physical experience of prayer and how we stand and how we bow and how that's really a part of the meditation of prayer. But that's the side point. So these are the three things. I want to conclude with one other aspect, that these three principles represent the totality, in some sense, the totality of the human experience. What is the human experience? It is the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual. What happens in our mind, what happens in our spirit, and what happens in our body. The mind is analyzing what is. The spirit is hoping, aspiring to what is beyond. And the body is the tool by which we accomplish that. And so the emotions probably are somewhere, I would think the emotions, depending on what the emotions are. There's two types of emotions. I think emotions could actually be on any level of them. The emotion is about connecting, right? So emotion could either be a physical desire for something. Emotion could be a yearning for the spirit, for that which is beyond. Or emotion can be an intellectual appreciation for a beautiful thing, which one is in the intellect, the other is in the spirit, and the other is in the physicality. So the emotion is simply the relationship between two things. Right? Olam chesed yibaneh, the world is founded on the principle of emotions because the world is about multiple beings existing in context of each other, and this is the only way that emotions are possible. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the time. So these are the three principles. Torah is the intellect, Eretz Yisrael is the physical, and Olam Haba is the spiritual. And in all of these, we are being given the gift of transforming our mind to a godly mind, and this can be hard to struggle against sometimes. We are we're being given the gift of the possibility of transforming the actual physical experience into a godly physical experience with the land of Israel. And Olam Haba represents transforming the spirit, which is also the very nature of society itself and the relationship of the world with all things, to a harmonious existence, but yet within the physical world in Olam Haba, with the world to come, with the Messianic age.